mentioning, we have hit all-time highs in the markets today, and today we are bringing you two market mavens, Bharat Shah, Nilesh Shah. More than 3 decades, I have known both of them, and they have been market masters for over 3 decades. So we are looking forward to a lot of insights. I will talk the least, I will make them talk more. So Bharat, first going to you, what all is going right? Why are we at all-time highs?
A lot of this is a culmination of a lot of things that have been happening and which are still getting unveiled. So it's not some very narrow correlation with some immediate event or something. I think broadly I would say we are at a cusp of one of the greatest economic expansions of this country. It will not just be the rate of growth of the economy, which will be superior compared to its own history or compared to that of any other major economy in the world. But I think what will be even more defining will be that it will be durable for a very long period of time. Durability brings predictability. Predictability brings solidity, and solidity creates a greater value because it reduces uncertainty about the future. And what is less uncertain becomes more valuable. And therefore, many structural changes have happened in the character of the society, character of the economy, and many more are still in the stage of being digested and being unveiled. And therefore, what is happening is not tactical but structural. And that gives the depth to the growth rate. Growth is very vital to create value, either in a business or in a market. But even more than the growth, the quality of the growth is even more, far more important. And qualitatively, this country is in a very significant way changing. The growth rate is becoming more capital efficient, return on capital employed, return on equity. Businesses are getting deleveraged even while they are growing. The character of the growth in terms of the predictability, certainty, solidity, it is these ideas which are at the root of what is likely to happen. And therefore I believe we are at a cusp of one of the greatest phases of economic expansions, which is going to be durable for a long period of time. Qualitative superiority will make it result in a superior value creation in the businesses, quality businesses, which in turn will make the wealth for the owners of these businesses. And finally, the investors who are patient, who are wise, who are disciplined, who are long-term, I think it will be unbelievable dream run of value creation. Nothing will be free from volatility. Volatility is the alter ego of the markets. So volatility will remain forever, but time to time you might even see violence. But through that volatility and violence, I think we are staring at decades and not few years of phenomenal expansion.
So structural story, decades-long story, and I'll come back to you, but I want opening remarks from Nilesh Bhai. And I would like to share with you, 6 years back we were in a conference, and post that Nilesh Bhai had put out a note also. The biggest imports for India were petroleum, were gold, and were electronics. And he was one of the first within the government, outside the government, to really talk about this electronics manufacturing to move to India, and that has become a reality. So please throw some lights on that, Nilesh Bhai.
अजय भाई, कभी कभी हम भी लकी हो जाते हैं, but at least we are now with a government where a common man can give the feedback. They are listening to it, and if they find it appropriate, they are executing it. तो अच्छा लगता है कि आपकी बात भी लोग सुनते हैं.
और अच्छी बात करी आपने. So how deep is this trend? You know, we are now exporting billions of dollars of cell phones, for example. EMS sector itself has now emerged out. You know, 10 years back, we would have found it difficult to find an EMS sector. But how deep is this structural story and how big can it become?
So, Ajay bhai, let's go back into the past to ensure that what kind of mistake we should not repeat. Long back, Samsung, a Korean electronic giant, came to India and they started making in India and selling in India. TV, fridge, AC, mobile. Today it is India's largest consumer durable company with about 1 lakh crore turnover. But we didn't lay a red carpet for Samsung. They went to Vietnam much after coming to India. They made in Vietnam to sell all over the world. What is their turnover in Vietnam? About 5 lakh crore. 5 times more than India. And is Vietnam 5 times bigger than India? No. Vietnam is 1/12 size of India. हमारे हाथ में हुक्म का इक्का था और हमने उसे पपलू समझ के फेंक दिया. We cannot allow this kind of mistake to happen. Today, there are entrepreneurs like Aman Gupta who are trying to build something in India. But all entrepreneurs of India are like Abhimanyu of Mahabharata. अभिमन्यु तो अपनी मर्जी से चक्रव्यूह में घुसा था. इंडियन एंटरप्रेन्योर चक्रव्यूह में पैदा ही होता है. अभिमन्यु तो कौरवों के साथ लड़ रहा था एंड लड़ते टाइम उसकी उम्मीद यह थी कि पांडव, मेरे अंकल, मेरे भाई मुझे बचाने के लिए आएंगे, मदद के लिए आएंगे. हमारा अभिमन्यु तो पांडव के साथ भी लड़ता है. तो चाइनीज कंपटीशन हो, क्वालिटी के इश्यू हो, सप्लाई चेन का प्रॉब्लम हो, वो तो हम मैनेज ही है. बट साथ में रेगुलेटरी बर्डन हो, कंप्लायंस बर्डन हो, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बॉटलनेक हो. तो महाभारत के समय में भी अभिमन्यु बेचारा कौरवों से जीत नहीं पाया था. आज के जमाने में वो पांडव और कौरव दोनों के साथ एक साथ लड़ रहा है, तो क्या जीतेगा? सो वी हैव टू एनकरेज एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप. We have to ensure that they have economies of scale. We have to ensure that they get lesser burden from regulation, from compliance, from infrastructure bottleneck. And then our entrepreneurs will flourish, just like Mr. Gupta was saying.
No, we don't often appreciate that manufacturing ecosystem takes time to build. Service ecosystem and the network relatively can happen faster. But in manufacturing, for example, PLI scheme, Production Link Incentive Scheme, once it is proposed, people try to evaluate the merit and relevance of it and durability of it. Once they are convinced, then somebody will think of an investment plan, a business plan, raise capital, find a way to invest, and build that ecosystem. That takes long time. And most manufacturing is a network. It is not in silo. You need the entire value chain to be built. And therefore, a lot of it takes time. PLI may have been proposed 4 or 5 years back, and now we are beginning to see, for example, in the cell phones, the kind of revolutionary changes which are beginning to brew, or in EMS, where the changes are beginning to brew. But the beauty of the manufacturing is once you build a network and you build an adequate kind of complexity and entry barrier, then it becomes a powerful, geometrically multiplying force. And that exactly is what is tentatively beginning to happen. Where, for example, in 80s, India began on the auto component and automobile journey. Today, India is a world-class automaker in all of its dimensions. The same thing in manufacturing. In most of the cases, we did not pay attention for a very long period of time. where we became almost like slavish importers of the goods from China or other places. And we were fast threatened to become a nation of traders rather than the nation of makers. Today we are building that ecosystem. As the ecosystem gets into a kind of a critical phase, we will see a huge flowering and overpowering growth, which will be a geometric multiplication and not an arithmetic expansion.
It's true. Nilesh bhai, adding on that, when China really emerged, there was no China. So, even in 91, when we were launching our Big Bang reforms, the GDPs were close, $350 billion odd. Today we are at 4 trillion, we are at 2007 China. So we are nearly about 16 years behind them. And there is a China sitting there. So will that China plus one, will it hit a wall? Or do you see India replicating a China? Or as Bharat bhai was mentioning, we were very good in services. We have Mohandas Pai here, who was one of the pioneers. Today we have, at that time when McKinsey report came, we all thought this is really blue sky thinking, and we have left it behind now. And that kind of services thing, are you seeing that China plus one coming through? And with the China sitting in the corner, protecting its stuff, as we saw in chemicals, they have again come back, and it's a 32% versus 1% kind of lead. How do you see India beating that challenge, despite all the goodness of China plus one coming behind our manufacturers?
So China is a formidable competitor, and they are already 6 times bigger than us. They have been making investments which we can't even dream of. But there is one industry where we have beaten out China. If you remember two-wheelers, about 15-20 years back, we were expecting Chinese company to come and set up shops in India, and our companies would have yielded to them. Fortunately, that has not happened. Partly because we created economies of scale. Second, we invented in research and development. Third, we were not only inward looking, but we were also outward looking. So today in Latin America, South Africa, Southeast Asia, you find India-made bikes as if it's a local bike. And today in two-wheeler exports, India is ahead of China. In two-wheeler production, India is ahead of China. I think the conclusions or the findings of the two-wheeler industry should guide us as to where we can compete with China. And frankly, Ajay bhai, our competition is not with China alone. For example, in ready-made garments, our competition is with Sri Lanka and Bangladesh and Vietnam. And where did we go wrong? In Indian factory, some time back, a woman working after 8 p.m. was considered a crime. So all our garment factories used to work only 1 shift a day. In Bangladesh, they worked 2 shifts of 12 hours each. They were more competitive. Then we gave up our quota premium in favor of Bangladesh, Vietnam, Ethiopia, Sri Lanka. So you became uncompetitive because you didn't have access to quota, and your cost because of labor policy was also uncompetitive. So I think there is enough space in the world if we get our house in order. And in two-wheelers we have demonstrated that. In IT services we have demonstrated that. In generic medicines we have demonstrated that. Now let's copy this examples into other industry. In recent time, in mobile phone, we have moved from being net importer to net exporter. In toys, we have become net importer to net exporter. I believe this year, even in consumer lighting, India should become net importer to net exporter, depending upon when you went to Diwali shopping, the lights were made in India, not made in China. So there are pockets where we have demonstrated how to outperform China. Now we have to replicate it across all the industry by learning from those industries.
And Bharat Bhai, you had taken out a study where you had shown how the dollar returns in the US, India, China, US returns were nearly 2 times the economic growth, India returns were 1 time, and China was less. So that quality, if you could, enunciate a little more on the quality of earnings that you are seeing in India, and building on Nilesh Bhai's part, which is the next two-wheeler or IT services sector that's emerging that all of us can benefit by investing in?
No, which is exactly the point. World gets too enamored the size and scale. While that in itself is important and necessary, but the qualitative dimension which gives it a sustainability, predictability, solidity, more often than not is not as much appreciated. Not too many people really appreciate the fact that whether you take last 1 decade, whether you take last 2 decades, or you take last 3 decades, in each of the periods, India has been one of the 2 most productive stock markets of the world. There have been only 2 markets in entire last 1 decade, 2 decades and 3 decades which have been at top. It is India and America. If you make a comparison of the 3 major economies of the world today, which is India, America and China, and let me take a last 30-year comparison. America in dollar terms, the GDP grew at 3.8% over a 30-year period. The market returns from America have been 9.2% per annum compounded. So 3.8% GDP growth rate, 9.2 for the market returns. The extra 5% plus came from the quality, governance, character, predictability, solidity and capital efficiency. India, nominal dollar GDP grew at an 8.5% in the same 30-year period. Market returns 8.4%. So 1 for 1, what you created, you got, but nothing extra. China, which is incredible, 13.5% nominal dollar GDP growth over 30 years. Never in the history it has happened. Probably, in all probability, unlikely that such a thing will get easily repeated at that scale. But what are the market returns? Less than 2%. 13.5 gave less than 2% return, which means deduction of 11% plus for the poor quality. The economies get carried away by the idea of size of the economy, GDP, and many somewhat ambiguous ideas like equality and all of that, and parity and all of that. Markets and businesses are built on character, capital efficiency, value creation, and solidity and predictability. And therefore, the returns that you make in a business is not driven only by the rate of growth, which of course is important. On the top of that rate of earnings growth in the future, you need the qualitative annuity sitting on the top. That qualitative part can be a positive number, can be zero, can be negative, or can be big negative. And in China's case, it has been a huge negative where 13.5% gives you only 2% as an outcome. I strongly believe that America is unlikely to be able to grow at that 3.8% on today's larger base, and therefore it has one weak hand there. And certainly, in terms of the quality of the growth, there are challenges that America itself is facing. If you look at Dow Jones and you eliminate Amazons of the world and Microsofts and Metas and Googles of the world, really rest of the Dow Jones has gone nowhere. That means the whole economy is resting on a relatively narrow base. Therefore, quality of the growth for America, I think, is suspect going ahead. And therefore, while it still may get a quality premium on the growth, but the premium will shrink. In case of India, without any question, in my opinion, we will have double-digit dollar nominal GDP growth rate for a length of time. That But more importantly, the quality of the growth, the capital efficiency, the return on equity. For the first time, the return on equity of Indian corporate sector has exceeded that of America last year. This has not happened easily. It has happened over a period of time, and America has been at the forefront of highest return on equity for a very long period of time. This is a marker sign of what are things to come. Therefore, qualitatively, while India did not get a premium, I think it will get a material premium. In case of China, 13.5% is a history. Rate of growth will be small single digit number, whatever. Please remember, nominal GDP in China is actually much weaker than the real GDP growth, because China is facing deflationary situation. And therefore, China will have a lot of challenge on the GDP growth rate. And qualitatively, unless the structures and governance and policies change, there is no reason to believe that there will be any improvement there. And therefore, I believe, while in 30 years, 20 years and 10 years, India has been one of the top two markets when we were still relatively in a stage of evolution. Today, in the next 10 and 20 and 30 years, my belief is, in all probability, India will be right at the top. And it will be number one market, and by some scale and a difference.
Nilesh bhai, throwing the same question to you. See, we were very lucky. We were a lucky generation. My wife and I started working in the 90s. A 1979 BSE Sensex of 100 was 10,000 in 2006. So we were, just by riding the conveyor belt, we made 100x, and most of us made 1000x. I remember when I started working, my annual salary was 55,000 a year in Citibank, and that was the top number one company. And all of us saw 1,000 times, 5,000 times income's growth. Will the people, the youngsters sitting here today, that Sensex which went from 100 to 10,000, and today we are nearing to 70,000, today, tomorrow we should cross that. How do you see that? Will people see that 100 times growth in the next 26 years, which is the median age for a company?
But before he does that, just a small point. Because you were at Citibank, you drew 55,000. I started with Asian Paints, and I started at 37,000. Proudly, I joined Asian Paints, and I'm delighted that I started there. But just to put the number in comparison.
Just as a coincidence, I had an Asian Paints offer also. Those days my stars were very good. I remember Levers was 50, Asian Paints was 37, ITC was about 34 with housing, but you had to work in Bhatinda selling rice for 5 years, which I didn't want to do. I thought I'll be in Bombay doing high-class banking, but I went to Chennai and did operations for most of my life.
And interestingly, I had a Citibank offer and Hindustan Lever offer as well. But I started with Asian Paints, and proudly so.
Well done, Bharat bhai. Nilesh bhai.
So to the youngsters, I was rejected by Citibank despite being gold medalist chartered accountant. And for 30 years, Citibank's market cap has remained where it is because they rejected talent like me.
Well done, well done. And see, we had the Access guy here, Nilesh bhai. He was saying that he got it very cheap, a 100-year franchise. So totally endorse your assessment.
So we were lucky in percentage terms. They'll be lucky in size terms. हम लोग तालाब में स्विम किए, ये लोग समंदर में स्विम करेंगे. Today market cap is $4 trillion. Our wealth is component of that. By end of our Amrit Kal, will we have market cap of 35, 40, 45 trillion? It's possible. So हम लोग तालाब में स्विम कर रहे हैं, ये लोग समंदर में तैरेंगे. अब समंदर है, तैरना पड़ेगा. एफर्ट नहीं मारेंगे तो डूब जाएंगे.
And so, which sectors will take this talab into the samundar of 40 trillion?
So one way to look at is that India is a rising tide and every boat will get lifted. Only don't sit in that boat which has a hole in it, which is misgovernance. So be with quality promoters. आजकल गधे और घोड़े दोनों मार्केट में चल रहे हैं, बट गधे लंबा नहीं चलते हैं, घोड़े लंबी रेस के होते हैं. तो by good quality companies run by good managers available at good prices. बोलना एकदम आसान है, करने में जान निकल जाएगी, but making money was never easy. Buy good quality companies and you will make money. I mean, you have to back right promoter.
No, just to add to that, I completely endorse what Nilesh says. You buy a business, you don't buy markets, you don't buy indices, you don't buy a theme, you don't buy a dream, you don't buy a trend, you don't buy a fashion, you don't buy geopolitics, you don't buy macroeconomics, you buy a business which is a right character to create long-term value. It must be backed by a management which has character and competence to seize that value and take it ahead. It must have large enough size of opportunity. Like Nilesh was saying, तालाब बड़ा होना चाहिए. मछली बड़ी है कि नहीं, but तालाब बड़ा होना चाहिए. Size of opportunity has to be large so that the business can grow and meaningfully and for a long period of time. Without growth, nothing, no value is created anywhere. Even in nature, nothing remains static. If it remains static, it actually regresses. And therefore, growth is an essential elixir of life, of investing, of the business value creation. But that is not enough till it is backed by superior quality of growth. The character, the capital efficiency, the predictability, the reduced uncertainty, the moats, ability to withstand the challenges of the environment and still not only survive but flower. And finally, all of that, using the art and science of investing, you convert into an opinion of value, and with discipline you buy at a margin of safety. But that said, while investing always remains that micro exercise of bottom-up stock picking, but the macro context is not unimportant. Macro context is a background. It's like North Star, which tells you that long-term journey is likely to be this, and therefore it keeps you on the path. The intellect throws the light, but the wisdom lets you stay on the path. And I think we are into that phase where that long-term light and long-term view is very, very clear, where it can expand multifold, well beyond any limited imagination, because compounding is not easily appreciated by most people, because human race thinks in arithmetic terms, but it is geometric idea of compounding which is at the root of what is going to happen.
But here on compounding, I would like you to also give us your baby boomers and India analogy, what you were telling me the other day, that the 1950s.
No, of course, I think what he's asking me is about, we were discussing about Buffett with the recent passing away of Munger, and how Buffett has been a great outcome of American capitalist society. Buffett's career started in the baby boomer era of the 1950s, post-World War II, and he happened to be at a fantastic point of time in exactly the stage where American dominance was beginning to rise in a huge way, and for multi-decades. And in that phenomenal period, Buffett had an opportunity to build his investment empire that he has built. It is some 65, 70 years over which this powerful thing has been built. And therefore, today Buffett is 100 billion and whatever. But in this country also, at some stage in future, not too far away, there will be investors with 30 and 50 and 70 and 80 billion dollars of the wealth will be created. I hope some of us had a chance to do that compounding for 30, 40 years. That looks unlikely if I look at myself, that I'll have 40 years to live. But if you have these 40 years ahead for you, then I think we will have those investors who will have 40 and 50 and 70 and $100 billion of wealth. And that is not something, a dream or just an aspiration. It's a solid logic of mathematics, economic compounding, and a country which is on move.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Nilesh bhai, in terms of Indian companies selling to the world, what Aman was also mentioning about that very few brands are really selling. Are there any sectors that you are seeing, apart from IT and pharma is already well factored in? Anything else, chemicals or anything else that you're really seeing which is now developing, which could take a portion of that?
So, Ajay, it is all about entrepreneurship. We invested in a company called Solar Explosives in Nagpur. Now, you don't normally associate an Indian company exporting explosives, but they are actually exporting explosives to Sweden, which is home of Alfred Nobel. And they have now created explosives which has no sound, only light. So you can use it in an extremely eco-sensitive area. So I think as long as Indian companies can be competitive, they can invest for scale, they can have research and development capability, the whole world is their market. Our real worry will be, since India is such a large market, will we keep a balance between inward looking and outward looking? We are a continent. There is one India which is enjoying lifestyle of French citizens, that's about 1% of India. About 27% of India is enjoying lifestyle of Indonesia, and rest of India is still sub-Saharan Africa. And every year we move people from Africa to Indonesia and Indonesia to France. Now, will our companies be just satisfied servicing this segment of market, which is very large, or they will be outward looking? I think it is up to companies that they should be focusing on both.
I said a point there. What Nilesh began talking about.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Nilesh began talking about entrepreneurship, but I think this is one of the much less sung about, praised about aspects of Indian ecosystem. India has traditionally enjoyed among the greatest entrepreneurial ventures. The capability of the Indian entrepreneurs is world class. For a length of time, it went through a system which did not make it as large as it otherwise could have been. But today, if you look at one of the biggest changes that has happened is entrepreneurship getting unleashed. And entrepreneurship is one of the most important sources of value creation. Country cannot grow, country cannot move without entrepreneurs. Value cannot be created in the businesses without entrepreneurs. And markets will not reach where they are without the high quality entrepreneurs backing. Today, if you look at in most parts of the world, you do not really find any entrepreneurship. In Europe, entrepreneurship is more like selling pastry and coffee, really speaking. That is the quality of entrepreneurship you find. In Japan, people want to work for Mitsubishis of the world and Toyotas of the world, but there are not many entrepreneurs to be had. In America also, entrepreneurship is largely confined to technology. In all other areas, you don't really see any meaningful entrepreneurship. China has entrepreneurship capability, demonstrated, but for whatever reason, the entrepreneurship is on decline in China. India remains one of the most important places where entrepreneurship not only is there, very strongly embedded, but it is culturally and otherwise growing at a rapid pace. And this is one of the biggest and most important reasons why the value will be created in Indian economy and in the Indian businesses. And therefore you were asking question about which sectors will do.
Yeah.
I think that question is not really very relevant. Too many things will do well. In a growing economy, in a large economy, many things will come by. Many businesses, new ideas will come by. Green energy, for example, is something which is going to be, I strongly believe India will be leader in that area over a period of time. And there are many, many opportunities which will come by. Once entrepreneurship is there, capital is there to be had in the world, and with the fire in the belly and the vision of the future, that fantastic journey of the next few decades is around in multifold areas. And we also underappreciate that India is actually one of the most diversified economies in the world. China not so, America also not so. India actually is one of the most significant, large size, very well diversified economies of the world, where manufacturing, industry and other areas are now gaining strong growth, aided by energy and the energy ecosystem. And that is where I think India is going to move ahead and will create multifold opportunities in many areas, traditional, new and ultra new.
Well, my minders are telling me we are out of time, but Nilesh bhai, I'll give you one last quip. So Abhimanyu, you told us about how do we become Arjunas in the market, and is it the right time to keep investing? People are afraid at all-time highs. Is it time now to take some money off the table? So some parting words of wisdom.
So एक मैंने समंदर की बात की. समंदर में भंवर भी आते हैं, and as Indians we have developed the special ability to go into those areas. So there are 18 crore Indians who have traded in cryptos and lost money. 18 crore Indian.
Anybody here?
सर कोई हाथ ऊपर नहीं करेगा, but किया तो बहुतों ने है. There are 2 crore Indians who have lost money in Ponzi scheme. एंड नॉर्थ इंडिया में एक निर्मल सिंह भांगू करके थे, पंजाब एग्रोटेक कॉर्पोरेशन लिमिटेड, उन्होंने लोगों को 60,000 करोड़ से ज़्यादा का चूना लगाया. देर आर 10 करोड़ पीपल हु बिलीव कि गेमिंग खेल के, रमी, लूडो, पोकर हम अपनी किस्मत बना पाएंगे. एंड इन स्टॉक मार्केट अभी तो तेजी है, बट आज से 6-7 महीने पहले 89% ऑफ पीपल हु ट्रेडेड इन स्टॉक मार्केट लॉस्ट मनी. 89%. एंड हमारे म्यूचुअल फंड में हमने पिछले 25-30 सालों से लोगों को 15-20% पैसा बना के दिया है हर साल, और कुल मिला के 4 करोड़ निवेशक हमारे पास है. तो समंदर जरूर है, बट भंवर से दूर रहना, बाकी पैसा अपने आप बन जाएगा.
I would, while I agree with Nilesh on many things, on this one I have some violent protest to make. The value creation journey is a matter of discipline, it is a matter of character, it is a matter of long-term vision, and it is a matter of wisdom. There will be enough people who will burn their fingers and their bodies, whether in crypto or in some foolish trading or in FNO. But that doesn't take away from the fact that intelligent risk-taking is a fundamental activity at the center of the human
Bharat bhai, there is a difference between taking a risk and committing suicide. If you jump from 10th floor, that's not taking risk. That's committing suicide.
Certainly.
Now, can you define crypto's value? Answer is no.
So we have no sympathy for 18 crore people who lose money in crypto or burn their money in FNO or do whatever. But I'm saying fundamentally, this society, the capability of that sense of entrepreneurship and ability to take meaningful, intelligent risk by a meaningful number of people is where the journey and opportunity is. In the process, there will be volatility. Volatility is an integral character of markets. If you are afraid of volatility, you shouldn't be in the markets. There will be occasional violence also, and not so often, but at times there will be blood on the street also. But through all of that, the journey ahead is phenomenal. There will be ups and downs all along, But if you are in a good business and you have a long-term view and you understand the value of the businesses and you have tenacity and mental restraint to last the game and be where you are, then the opportunity is not 5 times and 10 times, but it is 50 times and 100 times. And therefore, the question of whether index at 66 and 68 or 1 lakh is a very, I would say, petty and irrelevant question.
I think we'll end on that 100x note. May you all make 100x money. One thing, please go home and evaluate. I just got that data today, Arnab, you'll be very interested. 179 lakh crores is the gold holding of Indian households. 28,000 tons. On a 300 lakh crore GDP, we are holding 179 lakh crore of gold. And just 20% of the market is held by Indian retail. So, point to ponder. We have all tried to convince you India is a great structural story. It's a massive story. It's a multi-decade story. You have funds from people like these to invest in. 10 rupee funds have become 2,000, 3,000 over the last 20 years, 30 years. You have 15% compounding products. Don't just limit yourself to gold and fixed deposits. Look at the stock market. Participate in the Indian growth story. All the very best. And thank you, Nilesh Bhai, Bharat Bhai.
And you failed to mention that fixed income is the most dangerous investment you can ever hope to make.
Which one?
Fixed income is the most dangerous investment that you can hope to make, where there is a guaranteed mediocrity. Real money will be made by the businesses and the value creation and equity.